Wait, now.
Four o'clock, right? Good afternoon. The September 10 meeting of the Montgomery County Board of Education is called to order for discussing our budget, holding our budget hearing number 1. It is 4:00 p.m. There are 7 members present. I declare that a quorum is present. At this time, we'll talk about the agenda itself. Without objection, shall we approve this agenda by unanimous consent? That is without a voice vote. Is there any objection? Is there objection? Hearing none, this agenda has been approved by unanimous consent. Again, we are here to hold a budget hearing. We will receive as information from Mr. Watts, information regarding our budget fiscal year 2025. Welcome, Mr. Watts.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Brown. I also like to thank the public for coming out and joining in with us in our first budget hearing for FY 2025. We all know that we are required to present 2 budget hearings before the public. Of course, this will be our first budget hearing for fiscal year 2025. The next budget hearing will be held on Thursday at BTW High School. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Our budget process for FY 2025, as well as all of our budgets, is pretty much is an interactive process where we speak with many department heads, many other stakeholders throughout Montgomery County to get some idea of what they would like to see in our schools. So we meet with program heads, department heads, principals, the superintendent. Sometimes board members make suggestions, cabinet members make suggestions as it relates to the board. We also meet with focal groups from time to time and get ideas from them as it relates to our budget. Of course, we encourage input from the public, but there are also certain things that we keep in mind. For example, we have to keep in mind budget constraints. As we know, all of our ESSER funds are gone now, and so we have to ensure that we're expending funds in a very conservative way, and we're definitely spending funds based on the needs of our students. Also, we always want to be within the boundaries of law, the U.S. Department of Education, the Alabama State Legislature, and other organizations that monitor our spending. There are also certain funding allocations that require local match. The State's Foundation Program, which is the largest source of revenues that we have, requires us to put up over $34.5 million of our local tax dollars in order to participate in the state's foundation program. We also have the state's capital purchase program, in which we'll receive about $7.5 million. But in order for us to receive those funds, we have to put up about $1.5 million of our local tax revenues to participate in the capital purchase program. So there are certain match requirements, there are certain legal requirements that we have to be mindful of when we're putting together our budgets. Let's talk about a few of the highlights that was accomplished this year by our board. Our district has attained approximately 3 times the state required 1-month fund balance. In fact, I just stated that all our ESSER funds are gone, but we have well positioned ourselves post-ESSER, and we're very, very proud of that. The district continued to receive excellent audit opinions. We had 0 financial audit findings for fiscal year 2023. And of course, we'll be audited for 2024 this upcoming year. All of our district banks are under one umbrella. Our district continues implementation of electronic systems so that we could have a little bit more convenience for our parents, our staff, and the community at large. And so we've implemented an electronic payroll system. Have a few hiccups as you would with any district-wide system, but we're getting those kinks worked out. We continue to provide annual financial professional development to all of our principals, all of our bookkeepers, directors, and that's something that we want to continue thereon. Our district will be recommending a more competitive salary schedule for several position types, including, we have clerical there, but administrative assistants, maintenance, security, technology, school, and other positions. We've already addressed some of those positions this past year. A few years ago, we implemented 3 efficient cashless payment systems for our community. Again, we want to make it as convenient as possible for our community, for parents and for students. And so we are using these electronic systems as much as possible in an effort to be as efficient as we possibly can. Our district has set aside over $23 million in reserve accounts for capital renovations or capital replacements, for technology replacements, security replacement, and vehicle replacements. Again, I believe that the board has positioned itself very, very well for the upcoming school year and for future years. Therefore, we would not have to attack general fund when certain expenditures come about or certain needs come about. Just like we certainly have some highlights, there are also some challenges that we have to deal with. One of the major challenges is our district enrollment. We have to do everything we possibly could to possibly stabilize our enrollment. Of course, we know as we lose students, we lose dollars. So working extremely hard to stabilize our student population. I think what the superintendent and board has done as it relates to programming, increasing test scores, and many other things as it relates to course offerings would definitely help in that particular area. One-time federal funded, the ESSER funds, that's those federal COVID dollars that was used to stabilize and help us during the era of COVID. All of those funds would be depleted by September 30th, 2024. So again, it's imperative that we continue to operate effectively and as efficient as possible, which is what the board has done over the last several years. So that's something we want to continue. We all know about the unforeseen cost of construction or the increase in construction costs. If any of us have built a house or have purchased a home over the last year or two, we know that the costs have been astronomical. We also know that borrowing monies or loans interest rates has been sky high. Interest rates are beginning to come down now, but the cost of construction has been just extremely high, and it has caused us to reprioritize our entire capital program. In fact, there's several other governmental entities, and not just governmental entities, but private industries that have had to go back and reprioritize their capital spendings. We see a reduction in our student count over the last 5 years. And so we want to, again, try to do everything we could to stabilize our student population. We lost about 3,500 students over the last 5 years. And of course, we know that equates into dollars. Montgomery Public Schools operate off of 5 financial funds. First, there's the general fund. The general fund speaks to the general operations of the school district. It will consist of all of our state revenues, our local revenues, local appropriations, private donations. So all of those dollars would be termed general fund or general operating dollars. Special revenue funds are mainly our federal dollars. We do receive quite a bit of federal dollars. Of course, the grand majority of our federal dollars for fiscal year 2025 will be depleted. That is those COVID dollars that I was speaking of a second ago. But we will continue to receive Title I, Title II, and other dollars that are specific in nature. And of course, most of these federal dollars are really based on poverty of the population. Special revenue funds also includes our local school public funds. There are public dollars that the local schools raise. For example, you have some local schools that have athletic programs. And of course, the monies that they raise in admissions would be termed special revenue funds. Monies that they sell concessions, those would be special revenue funds. So local schools have fundraisers, have various type of operational funds at their local school that are raised at the local school and kept at the local school. But they are special in nature because those monies are for those local schools. Capital project funds, of course, the acquisition or construction of major capital expenditures, basically the building of schools and the renovation of schools. And of course, as many of you all know, we'll be doing a lot of major renovations coming up in fiscal year 2025. Debt service funds, the payment of long-term debt, long-term notes, and long-term bonds. We'll be meeting with the financial advisors this week to talk about the letting of bonds. Fiduciary funds or non-public local school funds. These dollars are also raised at the local school level, but they are for a specific group of children. For example, you may have students that are part of a HOSA club or some other type club where that club may have a fundraiser specifically for that particular group of students. And those funds could only be expended for that particular group of students. You may have a FBLA club. Well, they may have FBLA club may have a fundraiser. Raise the funds, and those funds will be spent based on those particular student, that particular group of students, and they'll make a determination as to how those dollars will be expended. Here we have our total annual operating budget, and we see that our total expenditures is about $374 million projected for 2025. Actually, that number is going to go up a little bit. I just spoke with Volkert, our construction managers, yesterday, and we know now that we're projecting to spend about $108 million in construction costs. So with that being said, I probably would increase that by about $108 million for the next budget hearing to include that projected construction cost that Volkert has just provided me. There we see our total general fund projected revenues of about $288 million. Again, the total majority of those funds are our state foundation program funds. State foundation program is the largest source of revenue for our school district and for most of the school districts throughout the state of Alabama. You do have a few school districts throughout the state in which local revenues are their largest source, but you probably can count those districts on one hand. Special revenue funds, again, are the majority federal dollars, the Title I, Title II, a lot of the dollars that's based on poverty. Also, our food service, child nutrition funds are part of special revenue. And the thing about special revenue funds, they are very categorical in nature. For example, child nutrition funds can only be expended on food service. We receive special education funds. Those dollars can only be expended on our special needs children. We receive career tech funds. Those dollars can only be expended on our career tech students. And we have debt service fund, speaks to the long-term debt of the school district. That number probably would be raised up also. And now that we know the projected construction costs, then we'll be letting those bonds to be able to pay the long-term debt after we let bonds. And anytime we talk about letting bonds, bonds are basically long-term loans. Whether it's a 20-year loan or a 30-year loan, that's what letting bonds are. It is debt. Capital Projects Fund, we see $51.4 million. Again, that number probably increased by over $108 million now that I have those numbers from Volkert. Our fiduciary fund, those are our local school special funds, FBLA, HOSA, those specific funds that our students raise that can only be expended for those particular students. And there again, we see our general fund. Of course, we see that we're projecting a beginning fund balance of about $80 million, and we're projecting to end the year of 2025 of about $82.5 million. I do want to say that this budget that we are presenting is a very conservative budget. We want to make sure or ensure that we are within the boundaries of the amount of projected revenue that we're projecting to receive, and ensure that we capture all of the projected costs in this particular budget. So it's a very, very conservative budget. Probably will end with the year with a little more than that, but again, we want to be conservative. Let's look at the breakdown of our general fund, which consists of our state revenues, mainly our state revenues and our local revenues. And of course, there are some other revenues that I'll speak about. But again, the general fund, about $288 million. We see our general fund revenue comparison, and we see that, as I stated, that our state revenues make up the majority of our general fund. We see 64.43% state revenues, local 31.56%, and then we see those other breakdowns. Now, in the general fund, it only consists of just the general fund dollars that includes most of the new ad valorem tax. Some of the ad valorem tax is budgeted in our capital projects fund, because as you remember, that law stated that half of the monies are to be expended on general fund or various teachers and other programs, while the other half would be expended on capital projects. So the other part of that money is being budgeted in the capital projects fund. Now, when we take under consideration the amount that's budgeted in capital projects, we see this note down here that state, and along with the local match, that our local percentage will become 36.1% of our total revenues if we are to include the amount of local tax dollars that are over in the capital projects fund. So that's 36.1. One of the things I did as it relates to our local revenues we went back and we kind of compared where we are now with some of the other districts that have similar demographics. We did notice that Huntsville's local revenues, and you may not believe this, it's a little over 50%. So we made some excellent strides in our local revenue from 25% to 36%. But again, Huntsville is about 50% of their local revenue, so they are really, really doing an excellent job of funding their schools. I'm very, very proud of the Montgomery population, what they've done over the last couple of years of approving an ad valorem tax increase of 12 meals for us, and it has been, it has been just very, very just exciting to see our parents and see our community taking the pride in our schools and are willing to fund our schools. We came back a year or so later, and our public also approved the continuation of an ad valorem tax. So we are just so thankful to our public, thankful to the Montgomery community for believing in Montgomery Public Schools. Well, let me just say this also. I spoke about Huntsville, about 50% of their revenues is, am I going too fast on this thing? Okay, I spoke that Huntsville, about 50% of their local revenues make up about half of their total general fund revenues. We also looked at Birmingham. Birmingham is at about 45 or 46%. So they're at about 45 or 46%, and again, we are at about 36.1% when we look at the local taxes that's also in our capital projects fund. But I will say that several years ago, before this 12 meals were passed, we were at about 25. And it was very, very difficult to really provide good education for our students with such minimum local support. And that's why we always need to ensure that we are doing everything we possibly can to provide the funding and the necessities for our students. But we're just so thankful to our community for what they've done. Our State Department of Education administers legislative appropriations for the Education Trust Fund, basically the foundation program, which, as I stated, is the largest source of funds that we receive. And the foundation program, of course, is based mainly on student population. And that's why, we stated just a second ago, it is so important that we stabilize our student enrollment. Because each district receives a proportionate share of funding based on that student population. Of course, we'll be funded for fiscal year 2025 on 25,351 students. There's about 300 kids less than what we were funded from on last year. We know that the difference in the quality of education in terms of funding is then a product of local support. This is why it was so important for us to get that 12 meal tax passed. And it was so important for us to come back and renew the 3 meal tax. So again, and I know I'm harping on this, thank you so much, Montgomery County community, for supporting our schools. And of course, we see that districts that provide more local support per pupil have increased seasonal cash flows, ability to employ more locally funded teacher units. And that is what this has allowed us to do. We have now STEM teacher units. We have additional foreign language teacher units. We have several other different type foreign language, ELL teacher units. So we are providing so much more support for our students and providing our students more offerings for those that have various career-based. We also providing more career tech classes for our students. So we're very, very excited about the opportunities that we're providing our students. We see our student population based on FY 2025 comparable to 2024. We see we lost almost 400 students. That was a loss of 20.09 teacher units. If I were to take 20 teacher units and multiply, let's say, about $80,000 per unit, that's a loss of about $1.6 million. So we have to stabilize that student population. We also see we had an increase in assistant principals. I was very pleased that our state legislature went back and looked at how they were funding assistant principals. I think there's still more to be done, but we're somewhat glad that they have kind of recognized the problem as far as assistant principals. Now, for every 300 students that an elementary school has, they will earn a half of an assistant principal. Not enough, but a good start. For every 300 students that a middle school have, they will earn one assistant principal unit. That ratio was much higher before. In fact, for an elementary school, I think it was 500 or 600 students to earn one assistant principal. For a middle school, it was more than 500 kids to earn one assistant principal unit. Now 500 kids will earn a full assistant principal unit. So we're glad to see that they are recognizing that. Still more to be done, but we're happy that they have started to do something as it relates to assistant principals. We lost 1.5 counselor units. Of course, librarians, we see we lost one there for a total unit loss of about 13.09 units. This slide basically discloses the amount of funding that we'll receive, our state funds from the state foundation program, plus the local match. Earlier, I stated that in order to participate in the state's foundation program, we'll have to put up, out of our own local tax revenues, about $34.5 million. That's to participate in the state's foundation program. Well, if we have to put up $34.5 million, that means the state is basically going to provide us about $154 million. So we'll put up $34 million, the state will provide us about $54 million, and that's how we get to that $188 million. The state requires us to expend X number of those dollars on salaries, X number of those dollars on benefits. Other current expenses is basically for the payment of our support employees, our custodians and secretary and administrative assistants, bookkeepers, and so forth. It also helps with paying the utilities and other type of expenditures. For fiscal year 2025, we will be funded $900 per teacher unit. Now, last year it was $8,000 per teacher unit. I know we see that $569.15. However, the state did provide us about $431 in August, which kind of fell in the prior fiscal year. But in all, they did provide us $1,000 last year for the last school term. Of course, this year is $900 per teacher unit. So each teacher will have $900 to expend for supplies for his or her classroom. $500 for technology per earned unit. Those dollars would be expended for technology items at that particular school. Library enhancement, $157, same amount funded last year. PD, same amount as last year. We see something totally different. We see something called common purchases. This was a line item that was not in probably hadn't been in the budget well over a decade. These are dollars that the school committee will vote how to expend those dollars together along with the principal or the principal designee. A lot of schools may decide, hey, there's a certain project that we want to do for this fiscal year, and they'll vote on that particular project and say, we're going to use these capital common purchases dollars to support that particular project. We did see an increase in textbook funds also for fiscal year 2025. Last year, we was provided $75 per student. This year, it's $100 per student for textbooks. Of course, we all know that one textbook, if you have any children that attend college, we know one textbook costs well over $100. So that $100 per child, still not enough, but the state is making some progress there. I do want to just acknowledge something else that the state legislature did. They did provide some extra supplemental allocations. And one of those extra supplemental allocations was indeed textbooks. And so we'll receive those dollars to assist us in the textbook category. So we're very, very pleased about that. And there were some other supplemental funding sources that the legislature did provide because they had the funding this year, and we was happy to see that in our fiscal year 2025 budget. Again, we will actually receive about $154 million, well, actually $153.5 million for the State Foundation Program for fiscal year 2024. We see there's an increase of about $2.5 million from 2024. However, I stated earlier that once you lose students, you also lose teacher units. However, we see an increase in the funding. Well, that is because of that 2% raise, state-mandated raise that is provided for all education employees. Of course, first-year teachers with a bachelor's degree will receive an increase of about 7.6%. So again, first-year teachers with a bachelor's degree will receive from the state, from the district, from the state, of course, as well as our local funds, an increase of about 7.6%. These are teachers with a bachelor's degree. All other board employees, it's a 2% increase. The state did increase the amount of monies for nursing, over $800,000. They also appropriated, this was another one of those special appropriations, also did a special appropriation for nurses to assist even more with these nurses' shortfalls. Of course, there's a shortage of nurses. Many organizations are having to contract and just do any and everything they possibly can to hire enough nurses. One of the things that Montgomery did last year, while the state only provide enough funding for a nurse based on the number of years in working in a school district, Montgomery decided to go back and say, hey, nurses, you have experience or had experience at a hospital or any other entity, we're going to give you credit for every 2 years that you worked at that entity, at that industry, we're going to give you a year credit. And so that really has helped us in hiring some of our nurses, along with some sign-ons and some other creative things. But we have hired a few more nurses than we had the prior year. We see technology coordinators, well as operations, transportation. Transportation, we're losing about $118,000. Fleet renewal, we're gaining about $106,000. Fleet renewals are dollars that we use to purchase new school buses. Again, fleet renewal dollars we use to purchase new school buses. Of course, we receive fleet renewal $7,581 per bus. For every bus that is 10 years old or less, we receive $7,581. Bus 11 years old, you don't receive fleet renewal. And let's keep in mind also that a bus could cost anywhere now between $130,000 to $160,000, one bus. So again, you see we're receiving $7,581 per bus that is 10 years old or less. Capital purchase dollars, $1.3 million. These are dollars that allow us to also help with maintenance and do a little bit of the building or renovations of schools. Of course, we are using some of these capital purchase dollars to pay our long-term debt. That is allowable by the state. since you sometimes have to borrow monies to build schools or renovate schools, we took out some loans, I think in 2015 and some in 2017 and so forth. So we're using almost half of those dollars to pay back those loan debts. I think one of them would drop off at the end of 2025. And so we're happy about that. At-risk dollars, these are dollars that are utilized to address those students who may be at risk of dropping out of school. So we want to do everything we possibly can to keep our students in school and provide the necessary supports that we can. And of course, we see our Career Tech O&M to help our student Career Tech supplies for our students. We see an increase of about $3.2 million in all. Again, that's made up of that $2.4 million in state foundation program, but most of those monies, or pretty much all of those dollars, is because of that 2% raise for salaries and benefits. There was a little increase again, as we stated, in school nurse program. There again, we see our local match. In order to participate in the state's foundation program, MPS is required to put up out of its local tax revenues about $34.5 million. Also, in order to participate in the state capital purchase program, in which we'll receive about $1.3 million, we'll have to put up out of our local tax revenues about $1.5 million. So we see that there are matching requirements in order to participate in those state revenue sources. Further, as it relates to our general fund, we see about $259,000. We receive a little bit of money, federal ROTC dollars from the federal government. Of course, we have a ROTC program at all of our traditional high schools. I think we have every branch at our schools, the Army, Navy, Marines, all of the branches we provide for our student choice. Local dollars, we see our regular ad valorem tax dollars, which include part of the new ad valorem tax dollars. County regular property tax, we see that. Sales and gasoline tax, about $33.6 million. We do receive 1%, 1 cent of sales tax dollars that is collected from the county does go towards education. And of course, other about $3.8 million, those are, well, of course, interest and donations and so forth. Other revenues, we see indirect costs. These are dollars that we assess to federal programs in order to administer those particular programs. About $1.7 million. Transfers in and field trips, about $9.6 million. Montgomery also operates on 8 functional areas of expenditures. The first one is instructional services expenditures. These are expenditures that are basically associated with the interaction between teachers and students. Again, instructional expenditures, the interaction between teacher and student. So anything it takes for that teacher to provide direct instruction to those students will be termed instructional service expenditures. The main majority of instructional services expenditures would be teacher salaries and teacher benefits. So whatever number of teachers, the thousands of teachers that we have, the majority of their salaries and benefits are instructional services expenditures. I also include paper supplies and the copy or anything else that teacher needs in that particular classroom to provide that instruction to the students. Instructional support services would include other provisions of supervision to support and facilitate the instruction for the students. This would be mainly the principals, the assistant principals, the counselors, the librarians, all of those individuals that provide support to the teacher so that he or she could provide direct interaction or direct instruction to the student. So again, instructional support services are those expenditures that provide support to our teachers so that the teachers could have what he or she needs to provide support to the students. Operation and maintenance is probably, you could guess, would be keeping our buildings safe, clean, and secure, would be operation and maintenance expenditures. For example, our custodial staff, part of our operation and maintenance expenditures. Our maintenance staff is part of our operation and maintenance expenditures. Utilities, the lights being on, that's part of our operational expenditures. The logistics staff is part of the operational expenditures. Auxiliary services operate from a subsidiary nature. So in the general fund, auxiliary expenditures will be transportation expenses. Again, auxiliary expenditures in the general fund will be transportation expenditures, transporting our students to and from school. You will see a little bit later that auxiliary expenditures in the special revenue fund will be our food service expenditures. But we're talking about general fund now, so that is our busing and transportation. General administrative activities concerned with establishing administering policy for the board, of course, the superintendent's office, the board, human resources, finance, all of those established offices that help with the operation of the policies for the school district. Capital outlay, the building and renovations of schools, for the most part, debt service, the payment of long-term debt, borrowing of the dollars. Again, as I stated, when we let the bonds, then of course we'll have to pay those particular debts. Other expenditures would mainly be extended day activities. These are activities that take place after school, are termed other expenditures. And I tell you, one other expenditure that is considered in other expenditures in our state is preschool. Alabama has a very, very large preschool program. And so preschool expenditures are also part of other expenditures. Let's look at that breakdown of our expenditure, projected expenditures for fiscal year 2025. One of the things that I do want to point out in this is that we see that the majority of our dollars are being spent on instructional services expenditures. So our dollars are going towards the classroom or to the classroom to support our students. And that's extremely important to us. We want to do everything possible to ensure that as many dollars as possible is going to the classroom so we can provide those various offerings, course offerings that I was talking about, provide the teachers all of the support they need. So when we look at instructional services and instructional support services, and of course instructional support services would be the principal, librarian, counselors, and those type of employees that help support the teachers. We see over $200 million of the total budget is going towards the classroom, or going towards the support of the classroom. And I think that's extremely important, that we want the majority of our dollars, again, supporting our students. Operation and maintenance, about $38 million, makes up about 11% of our total budget is operation and maintenance. Auxiliary expenditures, again, those expenditures are basically transportation, busing our students to and from school. General administrative, about $10.4 million. That's other expenditures, about 4.9, or other expenditures and other fund sources, about $15 million. And again, a lot of the preschool expenditures and extended day services are those other expenditures. Then we see a breakdown of our total expenditures. And we see our instructional support together, and that makes up almost 75% of our total general fund expenditures. So we're very, very proud of that about 75%, almost 75% of our total expenditures are indeed going towards the classroom. Of course, we see operation and maintenance. I think I said 11%, but it really is 13.37% there. Auxiliary about 3.7%. General administration about 3.65%. The state pretty much has a guideline. I don't know whether you would say a guideline, but they pretty much say that administrative expenditures really should not exceed 5% of a school district's budget. So we're very happy that we're at less than 4% as it relates to general administrative expenditures. There we see our total projected revenues for 2025. Total projected expenditure, $286 million in the general fund, and we're expecting an excess of revenues over expenditures of about $2 million. We project to begin the year with about $80.5 million. And of course, in FY 2025, we're almost $83 million. I do want to say again that this is a very conservative budget. We want to be conservative. We want to ensure that we capture all costs. We maybe put a little bit of percentage above the cost to make sure we had everything captured. Right now, we're in a time that we don't know exactly what's going to happen with this economy. So we wanted to be positioned for anything that may take place in our economy. Our required general fund balance is estimated for fiscal year 2025 at about $23.8 million. So we see that we're well beyond 3 times our fund balance, general fund balance. Again, we want to conservatively budget also because those, and I keep saying this, the ESSER funds are gone, so we want to make sure we capture all of our costs. Stated earlier that we developed capital reserve accounts that we truly need. We know that there are going to be times in which we are going to have to replace a roof. There are going to be times that we will have to replace HVAC systems or new plumbing systems, and we have to be prepared for that. And so we have a capital replacement account to be able to address many of those upcoming needs. Technology replacement and repair. One of the things that ESSER funds did for us, it allowed us to provide a device for every one of our students, so that if COVID or some type of shutdown happened again, then we have the means to provide continuous instruction to our students at home. This is something we want to continue whether the ESSER funds are here or not. So we thought it was important that we have a reserve account for technology. Again, we want to continue to provide this type of support for our students. We also know how important security is in today's society. We want to continue to provide a safe and secure environment for our staff and our students. So we thought it was important to fund a security replacement account, so that when those needs or when certain things are needed in the area of security, then of course we could do what we need to do in that particular area. Vehicle replacement, $1.1 million. Of course, we know that at times that the fleet is not going to last forever, and we want to make sure that we're able to address that as well. So we have about $23 million set aside in our reserve accounts. You see our projected beginning general fund balance. The one I always focus on is the local general fund at about $72 million. So that is what I really look at as it relates to our general fund. Those other dollars are restricted for those particular priorities, such as transportation. Those dollars can only be expended for transportational needs. Governor turnaround that we have about three schools, is it three schools, Pamela? Three schools that are part of the governor's turnaround project. Of course, I just spoke about the general fund, and then we have some restricted grant funds that have to be restricted just for those particular programs. But again, when we look at the total amount of our 1 month required fund balance of 23 point some million dollars, we multiply that times 3, we still have the 3 times our general fund balance. We kind of want to stay around that particular area. Next, I'll just speak briefly about our special revenue source. Again, the special revenues are mainly our federal dollars. These dollars, again, are categorical in nature, whereas we have to expend those dollars exactly how the federal government states. Whether it's special ed dollars on special needs students, whether it's career tech dollars for our career tech population, whether it's Title I dollars, which is based on poverty and helps to provide additional instruction for our students. We see our total projected special revenue of about $63 million, and which about $58 million are federal dollars. Of course, the $3.3 million in special revenue, those are those local school public dollars, and that's a little bit of child nutrition dollars in there. There we see a breakdown of our special revenue fund. We see 92% of our total special revenue dollars are federal funds. Again, they're categorical in nature. I think it's also important to note, as it relates to federal dollars, the federal government basically states to us without saying it that, of course, while we have the monies, we'll provide monies to school districts. However, always keep in mind that there could be political changes, there could be downturns in the economy, and the federal government then can only provide or will only provide the amount of monies that are available for education. So what they say that these monies are supplemental also. They are to supplement and not to replace, because they don't want us to be too dependent on federal dollars. They are saying that basically funding of education is basically the responsibility of both state and local government. But they'll provide us the support as long as the monies are there. Let's look at a change in our federal dollars from the prior year. You see, we received about the same amount in Title I dollars. So it's a little bit of decrease in Title II of about $260,000. The biggest change we see is the ESSER dollars. So we had quite a bit of ESSER dollars, and those dollars are now gone. So we see there was about $71 million there. All the ESSER dollars have been depleted. So again, it's important that we budget conservatively and that we be as efficient as we possibly can. We see there's a decrease of about $70 million from the prior year, mainly because of ESSER dollars. And that is why I think it's so important that our district prepare itself and be well positioned post-ESSER. A breakdown of our other special revenue dollars, we see the state revenues about little special grants that some of the schools receive. We also see little C&P daily sales. As I stated, some local school public dollars also there. C&P pass through and some internal transfers makes up. But we know that 92% of our total special revenue are indeed our federal dollars. There we see the expenditures as it relates to Fed. Again, the majority of those dollars are going towards the classroom. Of course, we see about almost $20 million of it. $20 million of that 61 million is going towards auxiliary services. Auxiliary services, again, for special revenue or our food service expenditures. So that's the feeding of the students, our child nutrition program. There we have a breakdown. A breakdown of our total special revenue funds. I'm sorry. And again, the majority of it is going towards instruction, but of course, child nutrition or the feeding of the children is also a large percentage of those particular dollars. We're projecting total revenues and special revenue, mainly federal dollars, of about $63 million, total expenditures of about $61.6 million, excess of revenues over expenditures of $1.4 million. We believe we'll begin the year with about $10.5 million and end 2025 with about $11.9 million. On those beginning fund balances, because the fiscal year is not closed yet, so we have to look at those numbers and give our best estimated guess as to what our ending balance would be, which of course would be our beginning fund balance for the next fiscal year. Debt service, as we stated, was for the payment of long-term debt. We see about $3.6 million. Is that 3.6? About $3.6 million of long-term debt. Of course, we transfer dollars from the capital purchase fund to the debt service fund to pay that long-term debt. Of course, that amount is going to increase because when we let those bonds, then this approximately $18.6 million here is going to also help pay for those bond debts that we'll be letting sometimes in this upcoming fiscal year. That just shows that we'll do the transfer from capital projects fund to the debt service fund. Of course, capital projects, these are dollars that are designed to build schools and to renovate schools. Of course, we will have a large capital program, but we'll be doing a lot more as it relates to our capital program this upcoming fiscal year. Had a conversation with our program manager, and we believe that we'll expend about $108 to $110 million in 2025, which now that I have that number, I'll include that in the next presentation. And this is the building of Percy Julian, the building of a couple of other schools, the renovation of several schools that the board had previously approved. Expendable trust fund or those private local school dollars, the HOSA club, the FBLA club. These are monies that the schools raise or the clubs at those schools raise, and they expend those funds specifically on the students in those particular clubs. Go back that slide. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. What now? Okay. Anyway, the last page is basically the overall budget. It's basically the overall budget. Just give a breakdown of all of the various funds, and it shows in the total section total projected revenues of about $394 million, total projected expenditures at about $374 million, increase in revenue, another amount of revenues of about $1.8 million. We're projecting revenues over expenditures total $22.5 million, projecting a beginning fund balance of about $123 million, and this is all funds, and an ending fund balance of about $145 million. It's the last one. No, it was the last one. It was the last page, but I think that's it though. Madam President, if any board members have any questions, I'll be more than happy to attempt to address them. Also to the public, if you have any questions, just let us know. Also, there should be a one-pager in the back of your book that provides you an opportunity to ask a question and send it in to us, and of course, we'll get right back to you with an answer for those particular questions. But now, if there's any questions that the floor would like to present, I'll be more than happy to try to address.
Thank you so much, Mr. Watts. At this time, any board members have questions? Okay.
I don't know if this is budget or if you know. Do you know any rules about Robert's rules about why a president would be able to stop a meeting without 4 votes? I mean, we had meetings that canceled after, they come after this. And according to Google, it takes 4 votes. So nobody's challenging it. I'm challenging it. It may take a second, but I'd like to know how a president can come in and not
Dr.
have
Keith.
4 votes.
Thank you. We're all aware of what your concern is. We can talk about that after the meeting, but this is budget. Do you have a
I
budget?
just want to make sure, but we also had something after that, and the public needs to know that it was stopped by you and you only. Oh, and of course, our superintendent. We wouldn't want to forget Dr. Melvin Brown.
Do we have any questions? Yes.
I did want to ask about under federal programs.
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed that I'm trying to draw the line to it, so forgive me. There were some decreases. Title II, professional development, CTE, which is career tech education, and IDEA. That's the first 3 on the screen.
Yeah.
Said.
Yes.
What's the reasoning behind the decrease? I know that this is federal money. Is it just that they're just sending less this time?
They're sending less, but student population also play a part in that too. And of course, as I stated, most of those federal dollars are based on poverty, and along with some other indicators, but student population does play a part in that.
And then my other question was about this one. Let's see, was about the homeless population. Usually, again, it's small, like the special education budget from the federal government. But in those instances with SPED and the homeless, are there other funding sources, whether it's from the state or from us, that we can pull from to maybe add something else, additional funds to it?
Yeah, we believe that, we think that, or believe that, and know that the homeless is extremely important to us. And we certainly want to be able to provide education for those particular students. So we set aside an allocation out of our Title I set aside for homeless. So it's not, so that amount there shows the homeless grant that we actually get, but we also set aside an amount of monies out of Title I for homeless students.
Yes, Ms. Cloud.
First, have we received our preliminary allocations from federal?
We received some. We hadn't received all of them.
Okay. And secondly,
We received most of them. I'll put it up. We received most of the preliminary allocation. Most of those that I have stated on that federal revenues, those are the ones that we've received
So
thus
you got
far.
Title I, Title II,
Yes, ma'am.
Title III.
Yes.
Okay. Now, as far as the homeless, I know we get state homeless funds. We get McKinney-Vento. So you, on the set-aside page, took Title I and put it on a line item for homeless.
Okay, we do not receive any state homeless dollars. Now, we do receive the McKinney-Vento, like you stated, which is listed on that federal program. That's the McKinney-Vento. In the Title I allocation, we do set aside additional funds for homeless because we want to be able to be prepared to address homeless students, even if we do not have enough in McKinney-Vento.
So on your EGAP, on your set-aside page, you have the line item for homeless.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
On the federal dollars, Mr. Watts, for family engagement, are those monies, is that 1% housed with the district, or is that divided into the school?
You have some at the district level, but the grand majority of those dollars goes out to the schools so the schools can engage with the parents. In fact, most of the schools have a parental engagement person that
Right.
works at the school. So it's basically at the school level.
So that
Okay.
parental involvement, the 1% of the 95%,
Yes, ma'am.
goes to really the liaison?
Yes.
Okay. That's personnel. Okay. And then your set-aside page with your other parental involvement funds, that's for district-wide.
Are there additional budget questions? Hearing no questions, the next meeting will be September the 12th. We're at 4:30 instead of 4 o'clock. A special call meeting for our budget hearing number 2 at BTW Magnet High School. 4:30.
Okay, thank you.
It should be 4. This is a typographical error. We will go with 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. Confirming 4 o'clock. Again, that's at BTW. If I'm not mistaken, that's 4400 Bell Road. On Bell Road. With that, thank you for being here. This meeting is adjourned.
Oh. I better walk away with your thing, man. Oh.